All right, in this video I'm going to show you some compositing methods. What we're going to do is just a couple of different things. With this picture here, I'm going to add a crackled paint texture right here, and we're going to apply this to her skin and then apply it in a partial way so it looks like half of it's falling off. Then we're also going to add this texture from a roughed up piece of film to kind of finalize that. So what we're first going to do is put all of these different images on different layers. And so I'm going to use this Sara image here as the background. And we can load images together on the same layers in a couple of different ways. One way is to detach. I've got my Photoshop to set up in these tabs. If I were to pull this off, you can see that I've got a floating image. I can resize that. Command minus will make that smaller. You'll notice that I could do a couple of things. The move tool, which is V, this first one, I could just grab this layer and drag it to Sara here, and it automatically creates a new layer. Let me go back to that. I could do another one where I could grab, with this one selected, this painted texture selected, I can grab the background layer and drag it on top of the layer that I want to put it on this image. I like to hold Shift down. What that does is it paints this image directly in the middle. Okay, so that's another method we can do with that. And then the third method is if I wanted to select everything, so select all, Command A, and oops, I need to be on the right layer. Okay, so on this image, if I were to hit Command A or Select A, which will select all, you'll notice that it's got marching ants, which signifies a selection. I could then copy and paste, so Edit, Copy, Command C, go to my new image, Command V, and it will also paste it. So those are some methods that we can do with that. So those are three different ways of doing that. So now that I've got too many of those layers, I'm just going to select both of those. I'm going to select, by holding Shift down, I can select multiple layers, and I'm going to drag those two to this trash icon. And what that's going to do is throw those away. All right, so what I want to do with this is apply this image. The first thing I'm going to do is just turn down my opacity. That way the image beneath it will kind of shine through. And I want to use my move tool, and I can move this image around on top of this one. I want to just see where I can get a little bit more texture perhaps on parts of this. So we can move this around later, but I'm just going to start with maybe this part here. And then if I adjust the opacity back to 100%, what I want to do is mess with the blending modes. All right, and so what I can darken, you may want to try darken or multiply. You know, that's actually created something pretty interesting. You can see that that darken affected more, you know, like this gray part didn't get affected for some reason. So what's really happening with these blending modes is that the pixels are getting compared. Layer 1 pixels are getting compared with the background images pixels, and like multiply will multiply the two, so it keeps both. Screen will take the lighter of the two. So we can kind of just experiment and see which ones do what. But in this case, I may want overlay or soft light, I think, because that's a little bit more subtle, and I can kind of see some of those areas. Oh, let's try hard light too. Nah, it's a little too intense. I think I'm going to go with overlay for now. Okay. And so what I want to do is I want to maybe keep this part here, but then get rid of the rest. And so with this, I need to create a layer mask. Before, we've been using adjustment layers, and they automatically create layer masks for us. But when we're mixing two images, we have to create our layer mask ourselves. And that's simply done by the layer mask icon. And I'm going to pull my layers palette out so you can see it a little bit easier. And it's this icon right here. When I click that once, it creates a layer mask. If I click it twice, it will create a vector mask, and I don't want to deal with those right now. So I'm just going to delete that, and it will delete that vector mask. So I want to keep that. Now when we're dealing with images and image masks, or layer masks, excuse me, we want to make sure that our little brackets are always on our mask and not on our image. Because if I were to paint using black and white with the brackets on the image, you can see it's actually painted on that layer. See that? Whereas if I were to paint on the mask, and I use a big brush painting with black, you can see that that's masked out that area, and now that's kind of gone. So we want to make sure that we're on the mask, and I can just kind of quickly paint away the parts that I don't want to see. And if I need to get a little bit more detailed in certain areas, I can kind of cut that out. Maybe I want to adjust the opacity a little bit in different ways. So it kind of fades off. So that's a method that I can use to control that. Now, one thing that's important with this too, you'll notice that the image is connected to the mask. So if I were to move this layer around, it moves everything, including the mask. But what would be cool is if I could move the texture underneath it, but leave the mask there. So I need just to unhinge those. So if I unlink them, now if I click on my image and move it around, you can see that it's moving the mask. It stays still. So if there's a different part that seems to be better, I can do that. So that's one way we can kind of adjust those things too. So now I've got that image connected with the blending mode, and it's got some good blending, although there's something down here. You notice that. It's probably me painting on that. So I need to kind of clean that up. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is add this texture. And so I'm just going to do that method of select all, Command C, and then, or Command A to select it all, Command C to copy, go back to my new image, and Command V, which will paste it. I'm going to hit my Command minus to shrink this down. You'll notice that the image isn't big enough. See how I've got edges here. So I may want to enlarge that slightly. And I'm going to do that by using Edit and Free Transform, or Command T. Now because this image isn't super, the size difference isn't that much different, and that it's a texture, this may not have a big effect. But you got to be careful about enlarging images because it may affect your resolution a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of crop it in like that, and we'll see how that looks. And now I'm just going to apply simple blending modes to see how they look and what kind of effect that gives it. So you can see that these darken the image in a lot of ways. Lighten might take, a different look or feel. With this texture, I think overlay and soft light, hard light might be the best solution. Seeing that they're a little bit more subtle. And yeah, I think those are going to be the best. So let's go back to maybe soft light or overlay. Overlay gives me a little bit more contrast. Now I may want to go back to this overlay and see if one of these other adjustments works better. So in some cases it might. I think that works. Another thing that we can control on this too, if we zoom in on this, I'm going to turn that off. You can see that if I want that to fade off a little bit, I could also control the opacity, which gives you one other level of control. So there's that. So that's a way of adding kind of a texture, not only to the entire image to make it look like it was messed up in development, as well as adding this kind of crazy texture here. But we're using a combination of blending modes and the layer mask, which is really a powerful tool.